So this is not an easy show to get into. The first couple episodes, very slow, a slow burn, deliberate pacing, whatever euphemism you want to use. It's slow. It's sometimes hard to figure out why you should care about these characters, why you should care about this obscure anatomy act that is being debated about whether it should pass. So it's hard to get into, but if you do stick with it, and it's a pretty short series, only 6 45-minute episodes or so, it has one of the most crazy, satisfying, off-the-wall finales, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that, and will go down as one of the greatest Gothic horrors of all time. And this really does capture the spirit of Frankenstein and that particular blend of horror so much better than all the Frankenstein adaptations that I've seen, at least. And what do I mean when I say Gothic horror? We have the gloom, the fog, the pea souper, we have the peat bogs, we have the waterlog, the drowning, think Ophelia and Hamlet, just this melancholy, darkness and dimness and stone corridors lit by candlelight, and we have fire rather than being this fact of life. Fire is this somewhat mysterious force that people think could even create sparks that could animate life. We have torches and pitchforks and the rabble, this idea of the poor as a kind of lynch mob, and we have public executions and the poor as an underclass. In modern times, at least in North America, we tend to at least try to think of the poor and the rich as fundamentally the same. There's just a difference in the wealth they happen to have. But here it's completely different. Everything about the poor is different. The way they talk, these horrible Cockney accents, so different than the accents of the rich, upper class. I shouldn't say bad Cockney accents, I just say strong Cockney accents. The way they dress, just almost the rags, and how buying a new dress and getting out of these rags is not just about buying a dress, it's about entering a whole new sphere of existence, potentially being allowed into this upper class where people judge you on how you dress, on your beard. Nowadays, most everyone, no matter how poor, you can afford to be somewhat clean shaven. Here, the beard, having a scraggly beard, that was yet another way that this upper class, this aristocratic upper class, was able to distinguish themselves from this underclass. And this idea of poverty being so linked with criminality, with disease, and this was a time where it was still, there was things like the plague and leprosy and horrible mutations. This was a time where it's much more biological. The horrors were more biologically based. If we think of what the mad scientists were, Dr. Magdala, Dr. Moreau, Dr. Jekyll, all these are biology based. Now we think of mad scientists, we think of nuclear weapons, or we think of robotics or artificial intelligence. Before, it was very much based on biology and these biological abominations that these mad scientists would create. We have madness and mental illness, and we have the abuse of that. We have psychiatrists and other people using mental illness to control people. Think of the yellow wallpaper, the rest cure, this idea of, rather than mental illness, now being associated with drugs and taking medication. Before, it was very much associated with asylums and control and imprisonment. And then we have a Fagin type character from Oliver Twist with his gang of orphans, and this is the start of the Industrial Revolution, capitalism, and you start to see the breakdown of families, and you have these missing kids, kids being unattended, kids being exploited. And you start to see these horror elements combined, where you have this underclass and extreme poverty that they've been reduced to, and they've been pushed to the brink of actually selling human bodies to these aristocratic, libertine, too much time on their hands, mad scientist types, for them to do these weird biological experiments to try to get eternal life. So this is a brilliant Gothic horror and a brilliant period piece. You could say Victorian. I think it's technically Georgian or Regency era. The tweed, the big sleeves, the top coats, the top hats, the glorious buttons, the wigs, those circular plates on the walls. I'm watching The Alienist now. Very similar vibe. Also similar vibe to Gotham by Gaslight, which came out recently. And you see the difference between the wealthy areas and the poor areas, the horse-drawn carriages. In one, there's the cobblestone, it's very well kept and very clean, and then in the poorer areas, you just see the streets just overrun with mud and dung. Okay, so quick overview of the plot without getting into spoilers, is just to give you an idea of kind of the central characters and conflicts to kind of ground you and help you understand the series better. So, how it all starts. Mary Shelley, who actually is the real historical person who wrote Frankenstein, she writes Frankenstein in this universe as well. Now, it caused a big controversy, and what happens is a body actually washes up on shore of all these children stitched together. It's very reminiscent of what she wrote in her book. Now, why this is important is because politicians who are trying to pass the Anatomy Act, which is basically going to give surgeons the power to have access to all these bodies that have been donated and be able to do lots of different experiments. So surgeons and politicians, they want to pass this act. Surgeons so they can do their experimentation, politicians to tamp down on the black market and this underclass of selling bodies. And the politicians are worried that this body, this grotesque abomination of things stitched together, this is going to be used to inflame anti-surgeon sentiment, which is a real thing. And if there's anti-surgeon sentiment, maybe enough public opposition is going to happen to this anatomy bill and it's not going to pass. So the primary opposition is from religious people. They say, look, if someone dies and then their body is used in these experiments, that person is not going to go to hell. So there's people on the other side of this debate, a lot of religious people that are very opposed to this Anatomy Act passing. It's very controversial. So to try to solve this mystery of this abomination stitched together very quietly, Robert Peel, the Home Secretary, he gets John Marlett. He gets John Marlett to try to solve this, and John Marlett uses Nightingale to help him solve this murder. Now, at some point, Marlett takes in Flora, this street urchin who happens to be pregnant, and he uses Lord Daniel Hervey. He's a bit of a philanthropist, and he tries to enlist his help with this young street urchin Flora that he's taken in. He also becomes a patient of Lord Hervey, who's a bit of a self-proclaimed alternative medicine doctor. And also his Lord Hervey's sister, there's some chemistry between Marlett and her as well. And then there's this character named Boz. Now, he's a peripheral character. I think he's mostly in there as a bit of a historical cameo. Now, Charles Dickens, one of his pen names was Boz. He was also a journalist before he became an author, just like Boz in this show. So I think he's more, again, kind of that little reference, make it more of a period piece. He's not central at any point to the plot. And then a couple other characters. We have Sir William Chester. Now, he's a surgeon, so he's one of the proponents of the Anatomy Act, one of the proponents of galvanism, using electricity to revive dead bodies. So he's on the pro side of the Anatomy Act. On the other side, who doesn't want it passed, is Sir Bentley. So I'm going to end the video there because I do have to go to work, but I did want to make a review because I think a lot of people are going to get turned off by the first couple episodes, and that's fine. But I will say, for someone who did stick it out all the way till episode 6, I was very happy. I think it's worth the effort that it takes to stick it through. Really awesome show.